Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for the Town of New London. And if that's not the hearing you're here for, you're in the wrong place. We're here tonight to hear Richard Hall Revocable Trust and Tammy Hall Revocable Trust on 75 Barton's Row application for a variance concerning a side setback for the garage, as I understand it. So, who is here to make a presentation on behalf of the applicants? Please identify yourself. Push the button on the mic until you see the green ring, and then you're on.
Hi, good evening. My name is Erin Darrow. I'm the project engineer with Right Angle Engineering to represent the landowners tonight.
Thank you. I see a letter of authorization in the file in which the landowners have authorized Right Angle Engineering LLC to speak on their behalf for the purposes of this hearing. So this is a hearing for a variance, and the variance, in order to grant a variance, the petitioner, you, on behalf of the owners, must put forth evidence sufficient for the board members to sustain a finding on 5 criteria. We are only interested in those 5 criteria. We have reviewed your application. We see there is a narrative to that effect. To the extent that you can confine your remarks to a discussion of those 5 criteria, that would make this hearing quite efficient.
So you don't need me to reiterate my entire narrative?
I think the board members, I can't speak for all the board members. I guess we could ask for a show of hands. But I think they're all familiar with the facts of the case. The idea that certain structures are being removed and others are being rebuilt. I don't think you need to read us the application. I just think you need to stand up and just tell us in your own words, put forth evidence sufficient to sustain a finding on those 5 criteria which are set forth in the statute. And at that time, once you've completed, the board may interrupt you to ask questions, if that's all right, during your presentation. Following your presentation, we will take comment from any of the folks sitting in the gallery. There was a rather large list of abutters, and if any of them are present and wish to be heard, we're happy to hear their comments. And following that exchange, we will entertain a motion of the board to go into discussion. And at that point, the board members themselves will discuss the results of your presentation, the effects on the 5 criteria, and we may ask questions back of you. And then at some point, when everyone is satisfied and the discussion is completed, we shall take a vote. So this variance application, I believe, has 3 alternatives by the end of the meeting. We could vote yay. We could vote nay, or the petitioners could, in view of the environment and the comments made and the tenor of the board, voluntarily withdraw the application. Or, if there are sufficient questions raised that you do not have the answers to, that the board needs the answers to make a finding, then we can continue the whole matter to a date certain, reconvene, and complete the discussion and the vote at that time. Okay, so, yes, Stephen. Voting. God, he's right on a stick. Okay, the board is required to have at least 5 voting members. However, the other members that are not designated as voting members may participate in the discussion as alternates, but they do not take part in the vote. So, yours truly is going to be one of the voting members. And I'm going to ask Adam to put forth some names here of those persons that would most likely be the first other 4 voting members.
So all of the full members are here, so it will be Heidi, Michael, and Steve, and Frank. Unless someone has a conflict. I said Dan. Yep.
Right, so that's me, Heidi, to my right, Ann to my left, Steve to the left of Ann, Frank is over there to the left of Steve, my left, and the other members, Lauren, Conrad, and Julia, and Peter. God damn, I always do that. It's not a personal thing, by the way. May participate in the discussion, but they cannot vote when the vote is called for. Thank you for that, Steve. All right, we can proceed with your presentation, please.
All right. Well, good evening. I want to thank everybody tonight for your time for the consideration of the application for a variance for the reconstruction of an existing 4-bedroom, single-family house with a detached garage as a single-family 4-bedroom house with an attached garage on the property located at 75 Barton's Row, tax map 64 lot 7. It's located in the R2 residential zone on Pleasant Lake in New London. Again, my name is Erin Darrow. I'm a licensed professional engineer and certified professional in stormwater management and sediment and erosion control. And I prepared the application for you tonight using information prepared by me and my subconsultants. The information's based on a site survey by Joe DiBernardo. He's a licensed land surveyor out of Walpole. And there's been a wetland delineation done by Beaver Tracks LLC, Jonathan Sisson. So on the existing property, there is a, let's see. Yeah, why don't we start with the survey here? So there's an existing house with, okay. I don't think this is showing up very well.
For the record, I noticed the board members are sitting here, and the monitor that we can see is not working. Is that supposed to be working, or? It was on, so. It's sometimes easier for us than it is to turn around all the time.
Yeah. I could see how it could be challenging for you to see the plans.
Oh, there it is. Give it time.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the existing boundary survey that has been recorded, and you can't see my light very well, so the
Pictures will only work on the screen, not on the
okay.
LEDs.
So the existing house, and we can keep it on this plan for now, but it shows more on the proposed site plan where the setbacks are more specifically laid out. But the existing house is set in the middle of the lot, but it has some encroachment on the site setback, as does the garage. But as you can see, there's a single-family house, a well, and then the garage, and a parking area in between. And Richard and Tammy have lived here for a few years, and there's a couple improvements for site access, especially with the garage, along with desires to have an attached garage versus a detached garage that we want to take a look at. And can we go forward to the proposed site plan? Okay.
Can I ask a clarification real quick, Aaron? Did you
Yeah.
just say that the existing garage encroaches?
There's a little teeny bit of encroachment, and that is in,
It doesn't look like it hits the setback line in the survey.
it does on the,
There's not a setback line on this side, so perhaps it is on this side?
Yeah, it's on the
Okay,
southwest
okay,
side, on that side,
okay.
toward the Barton's Row. It's a very small area. I have the area listed out in my narrative, which I was just. The existing garage is located 19.5 feet off the southwesterly side yard setback instead of 20 feet. So there's approximately, it's a little over 5 square feet. I was calling it 5 square feet of existing footprint in the side yard setback. So with the existing configuration, basically, and I can elaborate on this, the house is a little bit over, the garage is a little bit over, the primary structure is a little bit over on both sides. More so on one side than the other. And in the reconfigured status, removing the house a little further away from the lake, which isn't really relevant to the five criteria, except in that it is in the spirit of the ordinance because it improves the quality of the property. But we are making it, the thought was, how can we do this, achieve it, and make it, the first goal was to not request a variance. And then the second goal is how can we minimize the impact and make it as nearly compliant with the ordinance as possible.
So am I correct in that the present structure is going to be raised and the replacement structure will be entirely within the setback?
The primary structure will be, yes. And I thought that was significant. We took a lot of thought and planning into this. The site survey was used as the basis for the architectural plans, really thinking about the footprint and how we could really achieve the goals for the long-term use of the property while, again, complying with the town's requirements. So,
Could I jump in with a question?
yes.
Okay, it's a very fundamental question, and maybe Adam will have to help me on this. A front yard is defined as a space extending the full width of the lot, lying between the nearest part of the structure and the lot line bordering the nearest right-of-way. Barton Row looks like the right-of-way, and so I'm struggling with the assumption that we're talking about side yard setbacks rather than a front yard and a backyard setback. Right-of-way is defined to include town, state, and federal highways, but also right-of-ways, public or private. It goes on to define private right-of-ways that serve 3 or more properties, which is in fact what this one seems to do.
No, and I know we've been through this exercise.
Yeah, maybe.
And this does have frontage on Lakeshore Drive, too.
Yes. Which is the primary road, but it is,
Every structure is very far from Lakeshore Road, but very close to Barton Row. Now, this may be a monkey wrench, but I don't think it actually messes you up that badly. It means that you got a 25-foot
Instead of
setback
20.
in front instead of 20, but you got a 15-foot setback in the rear, if you buy my theory.
if
which
that
means
is,
that
yeah,
you-
so if that's the case, and proportionally speaking, it's consistent with kind of what we're requesting.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is now the house is being rebuilt in the same footprint or even
We're-
less.
Well, we're actually moving the primary structure. Because part of it right now is located within the side yard setback, we're moving it completely out. We're also moving the primary structure a little bit further away from the lake.
Understood. So,
Yeah.
so I guess my fundamental question is I looked at all this and I said, looking at the definitions and the way the driveway accesses the house, it is a right-of-way. It's a private right-of-way, I think.
I know we've talked about it, but we've been working on this on and off for a while, and we didn't.
I'm not sure who you talked about it with. We're talking,
Oh, yes, we haven't talked about it with the zoning board in this context, no. But in the planning context, as we've prepared for the application, and we've worked with the town.
You have spent several hours, well, the representatives of the owners have spent several hours with our zoning administrator discussing this
over time.
variance, possible application for a variance long before we gathered here tonight after the notice to the abutter. So there's been considerable discussion that we were not privy to.
So Steve,
Not
with,
that that's
Sorry.
germane
Yes.
one way or the other. I'm just, for the record, there's been some discussion with the zoning administrator about this.
so Steve, with your line of thought, you would consider this a corner lot? Because there's frontage on Lake Shore, and so it would have to be that the front yard would be the space extending the full width of the lot lying between the nearest part of the structure and the lot line bordering the nearest right-of-way. So you'd have the state, or the town road as one leg, and then you'd have the lot line with the internal private right-of-way as a leg, creating two front yards, making it a corner lot? Is that how you would see it?
No, though, because that road, it doesn't extend along the lot line, so I don't know whether that makes it a corner lot or not.
Well, I have one question. Where does the right-of-way end? I can see the Connors property south, but where does the right-of-way end? Where does the Connors property start? Do you know that?
The right-of-way ends at the Hall's property. So I'm wondering if the right-of-way is considered still like a shared road or right-of-way, and this part might be a shared driveway?
Well, I guess that's my question. Where does it become the Connors property, and then where is the right-of-way? Because if the right-of-way ends here at the Connors property, then that conversation's out. But I can understand if it continues on to the Hall property, and Adam, it'd be tough to call it a corner lot when it's not on a corner. It just has access to two streets.
But so if they were going to build an accessory structure adjacent to Lake Shore, what would you expect the setback to be
Yeah, that's a good point.
with a second driveway?
So, you're asking whether it would be a corner lot at that point? I don't know, suppose you have accesses from two sides, does that make it a corner lot? I mean, that's what we have is Lake Shore, and then another road butting into it, but it's not a corner in the conventional sense.
But if we're going to call both front yard setbacks, that effectively makes it a corner lot.
Oh, I'm not calling Lake Shore a front yard setback. The definition says the nearest right-of-way, the nearest part of the structure and the lot line bordering the nearest right-of-way. Barrel Row is the nearest right-of-way. The structures are way far away from.
So if they wanted to build an accessory structure, a detached garage off of Lake Shore with a second driveway, what would the setback for there be required? Front yard setback?
I don't know.
Oh, I see.
You're not persuading me that these are side yards. I mean, I don't see where you're going with this.
Because then if we could, this becomes a rear lot line. That's only a 15-foot setback, and they are proposing going up to 16 feet. Whereas if this is a corner lot, they still have to achieve the 20 feet on the rear. But if you're seeing the Barton Row side as the front yard and the northwest lot line as the rear, then there's no variance needed to go to 16 feet. So then it makes a difference whether or not you see each one of those other legs as side yard setback with the Lake Shore and the Barton's Row side as the corner lot.
I have a quick question. Is there anything that prevents a future driveway from Lake Shore Drive onto the property?
No, I mean, lots are allowed two driveways. As far as sight lines and things there, something has not been engineered. Whether or not they have the ability there, that's not something we know, but fundamentally, they should be able to get a driveway there. Maybe not to access all the way down to the house because of the wetlands in between, but they could also get a special exception for wetlands crossing.
Although that might be challenging with the DES because they are very rigorous if there's any way to get to the property without touching a wetland to where you need to go. I think we might have a challenging time with that.
But it doesn't mean that you couldn't get a driveway to an accessory structure on the other side of the well.
And DES might change their
Yes.
mind
Everything
on
can
that.
change.
Well, I
I'm
believe that
just wondering, why was a driveway, does anyone know the history to why a driveway was never placed off a Lakeshore Drive?
It's
Curious.
very wet through there, and that area receives a lot of drainage.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
the deed only refers to a right-of-way, but it doesn't describe a width or delineate the location of it. It's just says existing.
It's an old Bristol Suite subdivision.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you
we
can-
don't need names, but okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So where are we, though?
I mean, to me, it's an important determination to figure out whether that's a rear or a side, because if it's a rear, then they can be conforming at 16 feet.
Right.
True, although the house then is within the 25 feet, but it also, as I understand, is within the footprint of the existing
Of the
house.
existing, right.
And so
they have
it
the
would not, would
non-conformance.
So we-
tell me they'd not need a variance.
No, they would have the ability to voluntarily replace within the old footprint.
Okay, so I guess what we're saying is, do we need to hear further from the petitioners at this point? Or do we have a matter that needs to be taken under advisement to determine how the board is going to interpret the orientation of the structures with respect to the front and side setbacks? I mean, what are you guys thinking?
I feel
I don't
we
want
should,
to take more time from them,
No.
but it means that we're going to have to reconvene if we have to step aside and say, oh, okay, the board, based on this, is interpreting X, Y, and Z. Then they're going to have to come back and do the remainder of the presentation, or they may not if we determine that they don't need a variance based on our orientation interpretation. What are you thinking?
I think before we go any further, we should make an attempt at determining which is the front yard,
Or if there are two.
Agree with that.
or if there are two, correct. Yeah,
Because, I mean, if I were to get a building permit for a shed, something as little as a shed, I mean, a very small accessory structure on Lakeshore Drive, if you read the definition that Steve just read, the public road in the front yard, I would hold them to the front yard setback.
Well,
Is that a conclusion that they'd have two front yards?
Corner,
It happens.
yeah.
I just did a variance in Newbury with 2 front yards.
Yeah. But
I mean, I get that the road does not run the entire lot line. It's a unique front yard situation, but where this sort of hammerheads into the property, that's selecting the lot line setback for that entire run of land, even though it's, what, 600-700 feet long?
So remind me, though, that if it's a corner lot, what are the setbacks?
you have two front yards.
Well,
Two 25-foot setback. But we're talking about a hypothetical that we don't have in front of us. I mean, who
well,
cares?
where it's Lakeshore Drive, is it really a corner setback? Because when you take a look at the distance between the corner of the lot and to Barton's Row, that's,
Okay,
Yeah, we have to look at the definition.
They don't-
I mean, it gets, the width of the lot and laying between the nearest part of the structure and the lot line bordering the nearest right-of-way. It's very specific with that.
okay, but I'm still confused. We don't have an application for anything near Lake Shore. We have something that looks like a front yard setback for the application in front of us. And I'm not convinced that we need a variance for that, because the garage is 25, more than 25 feet. They're proposing, they're tearing down a garage that's within that 25 feet. And they're more than 15 feet from the line opposite what I believe to be the front yard line.
I think because,
doesn't.
I think because of the shape of the property, this bowling alley lot,
so you can see how the property is unique and distinct. I mean,
well, there's one right next to it that's identical, and then one right next to that that's identical. So,
Yeah, but they don't.
Yes, but-
Driveway
Right.
butting into the
Yes,
halfway
yeah.
point.
just the width of the lot is a challenge. I guess before we go any further, I'd like to ask some questions that might help me make a decision. And So the width of the lot is about 70 feet, 71 feet?
It varies, it tapers, it's not consistent.
Oh, so at the point of the garage, just your best guess of how wide is it there?
Maybe about 70, a little less.
So I guess my first question would be, what is preventing you from putting the garage in the setback? I'm sorry, outside the setback, within the buildable area?
Access, vehicular access into and out of the garage is very challenging in its current configuration. And the owner would like to have the garage be attached for a number of reasons.
Having an attached garage is not an unreasonable,
And access with the cars and turning around is challenging there. So this reconfiguration is going to improve parking. It's going to improve a lot of that accessibility. And
I'm sorry. I don't
The-
mean to cut you off.
It's all accessed by a right-of-way,
Right,
which contains no dimensions on the deed.
it is
It's-
it is a surveyed right of way. I mean, that is
it's very specific, Michael.
I didn't notice that in the deed, but okay. Okay.
So if you move the garage closer to the lake, would you be able to improve access?
well, we are moving. It is going to be closer to the lake because it's going to be attached to the house. The house is scooching back a little bit, and the garage is moving forward.
Could you move it closer to the lake? Is that a well I'm seeing?
That's a well.
So there's
so
a well
I-
preventing you from moving it closer?
I have it as close to the well, and even where it is, I think it's going to pose some challenges for construction, but I think it can be done.
So because of the well, you can't move it any closer?
Yes. And to abandon a well like that is
No. Where would you put it if you abandoned the well?
I mean,
In the 50-foot setback?
but then you also have this void. No matter how much you fill something like that in.
There's an electrical cabinet. Is that an existing cabinet?
Yes, there is a pump area there. There's an electric outlet. There's a tank with a pump.
Is that a utility pole also? Next to the cabinet,
Utility pole, I'm trying to remember. In front of the house.
the corner?
The only utility pole is back by the garage, just not on the property.
No, so the utility pole is back by the garage. It's shown on the plan. That's only a utility box. It's not a pole.
Okay.
And I don't think I introduced Rich Hall, one of the owners, from Rich and Tammy Hall.
I think that those were my only questions. I guess now we can go back to, where is the front yard, and is this a corner lot?
Sorry. So on the screen, in yard requirements of Article 5, on each corner lot, there shall be a yard having a width of not less than 25 feet abutting each right-of-way. And then with the definition of right-of-way, that would include the local and the private Barton's Row road, which to me, if I were sitting in my office having to approve the building permits for those, then I would count the front yard setback on each side, potentially being 25 if we're going to see Barton's Row as creating that front yard. But then in that scenario, that means that both the lake and the northwest become the the side yards, because the sides connect to the front, right? The rear doesn't connect to the front.
So you're saying if you call that easterly boundary a front yard, it's also a side yard, so it also has a 20-foot setback?
Correct.
So if every corner lot, we say 20 feet because they're both sides as well as fronts?
Right, because a rear doesn't attach to the front.
And we just did that. We just had a corner lot case, so.
That's why we're talking about this.
So then it may change the interpretation on the other side of the house, which could have 5 more feet constraining factors, which shouldn't be an issue because they're replacing within the footprint of the house. But by determining that it is a corner lot, it still keeps the back, poor choice of words, it still keeps the setback in question a side yard setback. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas if we throw
20 feet, in other words.
Whereas if we throw Lakeshore side of it out as two sides, then that creates the rear. But if we have the two fronts, it's two sides. I'm sorry.
Okay, but why do we think this is a corner lot? Because,
Because it fronts on two streets.
It abuts two rights of way.
Because
Makes sense.
the very end of Barton's Row is touching the property. So it's not touching it where it intersects with Lakeshore Drive, but where it's touching the property, we have the deeded right-of-way, and, I mean, I would want to verify it with the surveyor, but I am fairly certain that's really what it is. I mean, it could possibly be interpreted that it's a shared driveway, but I think I would probably lean toward being more conservative and calling it a right-of-way.
But they're not mutually exclusive.
It's a named private road. I mean,
It really
Barton's
is.
Row.
It's, and I know that Joe surveyed it as a right-of-way. It was a complex survey.
But with the corner lot requirement in here, abutting 25 feet, abutting each right-of-way, there are two abutting right-of-ways. They don't connect, and it's a funky situation for sure. But there are two lot lines that abut individual right-of-ways.
Yeah.
So I can see what Adam is saying, and I always think what happens to our decision after this meeting? Can anyone appeal it? If this were to go to
Well,
Housing Appeals Board, how would they see it?
if someone is unhappy with the decision, they can ask for a rehearing of the board. If that rehearing is denied, their option is to go to the housing court, which was specifically created to hear these kinds of appeals instead of the Superior Court.
So I would lean on the more conservative side, and Adam makes a good point that this is a corner lot. It abuts two right-of-ways.
Okay, so what that means in effect is that we're looking at for the rear of the garage, that is the western side,
Northwest, yep.
we're looking at 15 feet or 20? Let's take the application of the new theory based on the two rights of way and mark it on here, let it set down what setbacks we're looking for in the envelope.
Yeah, so they are required to have a 20-foot side yard, and they're asking for a 16-foot side yard.
But if it's a corner lot,
I'm sorry, that is if it's a corner lot. The side yard, that would be a side yard, the westerly side, and that would require a 20-foot setback.
great. And the easterly, or rather the northerly side, that is the side that faces Lakeshore Drive, would require what setback? 25.
Yes. And the side on the right-of-way, which I forgot the name of that, Barton Way, is also a front yard and would require 25.
Well, then the next question is, can you put a garage of that size in that lot and observe those setbacks without violating either? Can you fit it in there?
Well, that's where I started asking. I guess we should continue hearing.
I would say the change further substantiates the location of the garage. Is it moving that setback even further over?
I mean, if you move it so that the western end of the garage does not violate the setback, what occurs at the entry end of the garage? Is that in violation of the other setback? I don't know, I mean, I don't know the answer, and I can't tell from the scale drawing.
It would be very close to touching the other setback. I'm not sure if it would be over, it'd be very close.
That's kind of important, though. That's kind of important, though. I mean,
Yes.
is it possible to fit that garage, given this new interpretation that
Well-
we've come up with? Is it possible to fit that structure in this lot without violating either of those setbacks?
We would have to get a waiver for the driveway, and there would be issues with being able to turn a vehicle around adequately. And fit all the grading on site without,
Do we care what kind of a vehicle?
well, just
Seems to
back
me
in.
we have quite a variety of vehicles to be stored in this garage, from my understanding.
We're just talking about backing up. I mean,
Uh,
I think
well,
I think on the part that's closer to the lake, it's unlikely to completely fit within the setbacks. On the part that we have a little further away from the lake, it might fit in. So I think it's unlikely to fit, but again,
Aaron, how many cars is this garage?
it's a three bay garage.
it's,
Would
I
a
don't
car
think it is
garage
irrelevant.
make a difference in terms of problems that you just highlighted with turning around and stuff?
What's that? I couldn't.
Would a two-car garage?
Oh, it wouldn't. It would not impact that. The location, it's the area across, not the actual width of the garage. And as it becomes bigger, it becomes more nearly compliant. The lot becomes wider, so the setback becomes less of an issue.
What is the distance now proposed from the property line to the garage?
Well, right now it's 19.5 feet, but the primary structure's 14.95 feet. So we're taking the primary structure, well, it's not going to be completely out, but we're moving it further away. So as it was proposed, the primary structure is 20 feet.
So just with the garage, though, you have less than 20 feet to the property line?
Yes.
Okay. That is a small driveway.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Aaron, what was the distance from the easterly property line to the garage?
19.5 feet. Oh, to the garage, right, or proposed,
The
sorry.
proposed garage, yes.
16 feet.
Yeah, the other side, not the side you're asking for a variance, the driveway side.
Oh, the driveway side, the existing setback?
No, from the proposed garage to the property line.
I'd have to scale it off.
What's the width of the garage?
The width of the garage is 24 feet. 16 plus 24.
Do you have a scale with you, Aaron? I mean, just a rudimentary using my pen scale on
The
here.
garage is 28.
looks
I'm
like
sorry,
it's
Frank,
like
it's 28
29.
feet.
Oh, 28, okay.
Yeah, I measure 30 feet from the property line to the garage.
Not have a scale with me. It's so close, though, that just the thickness of a line width when it's converted to Adobe might make the difference in how close it's measured when you're within a tolerance of a foot.
So at best guess, if the lot's 70 feet wide, you have a
Yeah.
16-foot setback, a 28-foot wide garage, you're left with 26 feet. Is 26 feet enough room to back a car out and turn around?
And
A large parking space is 20 feet, and you need a 10-foot radius, so if you have it's tight.
especially if they have a propane truck coming in to deliver their fuel.
State that.
The garage is, I think you missed how deep.
Ann. Oh, sorry, did you want to?
I've been going around in circles on which direction is the 28 feet of the garage? Is it side to side? or
Yes.
length? It is side to side.
Yes. The depth.
The depth, this, the 28 feet.
Like the
And-
driveway pulling in, that's 28 feet.
Yep.
And then it's 40 feet this way, Anna, if you can see the cursor.
Yep.
So there's first bay here, second bay, third bay.
Yep.
Aaron, you mentioned a waiver for the driveway. What is the waiver? You said we could do it if we got a waiver for the driveway. What is the waiver you were referring to?
The driveway has to be more than 10 feet off the property line.
It does. It complicating matters further, there's some question as to whether or not on a private road we have the ability to enforce the driveway regulations. So that is a more recent issue unrelated to this project. But yes, waivers could be requested. Additionally, you have an existing driveway there in this
Yes.
surface area.
So for the
So it's
record
really-
then, Barton's Row is a private road.
Correct. It is not a town-maintained road.
The driveway regulations apply to people connecting their driveways to town roads, or state roads, and is silent on the issue of private roads. Is that a correct interpretation?
Potentially, to be determined, but that's the issue we're wrestling with on a different property. And then the question becomes then the driveway regulations applying to the roads like Barton's Row that are these private access points.
Well, what would be
But that's outside of this realm.
understood, but for the purposes of a board, what would be the problem from a safety standpoint with applying the driveway regulations as if it were the requisite roadway?
So I think the problem comes if somebody doesn't want to meet them and they appeal that. Of course, part of the point of a driveway regulation is to make sure that there's adequate access for emergency services. And so in this scenario that this question has come up on, we're having them go through the process because they want to make sure a fire truck can make it to their house. And
And
so
if-
they're voluntarily going through it.
And if we have a very narrow driveway turnaround with very little space to the property line, the snowbank's going to fill up that turnaround pretty quickly.
They're not going to be able to turn around anyway. They're big fire trucks. They're
Right
just gonna
now,
They're going to get there, and that's going to be,
But in this situation, this driveway area is already their driveway
it's
area.
it's a significant improvement to what is there now.
So it's not an expansion of the area that they're already parking their cars because they have to get into this garage right now.
Well, I guess the problem is that I don't know if any of the other board members are going to have a hard time deciding, approving this one way or the other if it adversely affects the health, safety, and welfare of the residents. If you can't get a safety services vehicle down here and get it turned around, that sounds like health, safety to me. And so what is our,
I
what
don't
is
think
our
anyone
role
is
in
asserting that that
respect?
can't happen. I don't want anyone on Barton's Row thinking a fire truck
No, I mean,
can
This,
get to them.
well, I would,
if we're bringing that up in a discussion about having a difficult time turning vehicles around,
that was considered when I laid this out. I was thinking about how can we make this so a large vehicle we can improve the conditions. And I haven't met with this specifically with the fire department yet. But generally, if you take a non-compliant area and they make it you make it a little bit better, they usually greatly appreciate it.
And there's typically not an expectation that a fire truck can turn around in a residential driveway. They would almost always be backing out. That
No, but any
is-
chance you can make it a little bit better and a little
Oh,
bit
absolutely, absolutely. But from an access standpoint, that does not everybody has to have a circular
Understood.
driveway.
Aaron, can we get a brief summary on the fifth criteria, the unnecessary hardship?
Yes. You want to start with the hardship? Or go through?
Yes, just the hardship, that's my concern. And
That's really
again,
the big one.
I don't need the whole, just an abbreviated version.
So one thing that came up in our discussion was the unique configuration, and you do bring up a valid point, Frank. I say it's unique, and you look at the properties right next to it, and they're all the same. But they're unique when you look at it kind of zoomed out. That this was a subdivision, and all the lots were kind of laid out like that. And I speculate it might be due to the soils and the wetness. So they're concentrating all the buildable areas closer to lake, which is also more appealing for saleability. Back when, I was going to say back when they made it, but it doesn't really matter getting closer to the lake is always more appealing. So the literal enforcement of the provisions of this property is very difficult because now we're even talking about like 20 versus 25 feet on a lot that's approximately 70 feet wide. So this lot was created before these side yard and the front yard setbacks were established, and furthermore, we can see how the application is even more unique in our discussion about how the front and side yard setbacks apply to this property. And I didn't elaborate that in my narrative, but I wanted to mention that because I think it's relevant this evening. The natural features of the property make it very difficult to access from Lakeshore Drive. And essentially, we're looking to reconstruct a house that is similar in stature and size with generally what's in the neighborhood and what is there now. It is a bigger garage. The house is a little bit smaller. We're really being mindful of our impact, improving stormwater management, which is really important because there's a lot of water that comes from abutting properties through here, not just this property. So we really want to be mindful that that's a unique characteristic and a hardship for the property, is really thinking about what we're doing with the water. And that's something that came up with the neighbors when I first started working on the design, and has come up again as we revisited this variance. But we're looking to build something that's reasonable, that's consistent with the neighborhood on a lot that's unique in that it wouldn't necessarily conform with today's standards.
Go.
I'm curious if the turning radius is so important, why is 28 feet depth so important?
For the
Can that
garage?
Yes, can that be, the garage conform to more of a 24 or 26 feet deep?
Well, a standard dimension garage is typically about 28 feet.
I believe it was 24 to 36 you had in the handouts. Anywhere between 24 and 36 feet is the normal
Yes.
depth for a three-car garage. So it could be as little as 24, and that would be normal,
But if you get
or
more
straight as
toward,
36.
so a 24-foot garage is not adequate to support the needs of the landowner. It's not going to be large enough for him to fit his truck or his boat and be able to get the use out of the building that he wants. I have a single bay garage that's 24 feet here in New London, and it's definitely too small. I can barely fit my car in, and I encountered a vehicle problem, and I learned that 24 feet is way too small. So it's more than just fitting in your vehicle. He needs to be able to fit his truck and his boat, and generally speaking, that's a reasonable use for his home and the location and what he's doing here for the house that's there now and the house that he wants to have in the future.
It's 3 bays, right?
For a 4-bedroom house.
Okay, so he's got a truck,
He has a
boat.
truck. He has a truck, a boat. He's going to have a workshop. He has his wife has a vehicle, and his elderly father is going to be moving into with a caretaker. And we really didn't get into this in the criteria because we didn't want to be limited. So we can't get into that. But for a 4-bedroom house, it can be expected that you're going to have 3 adults, and in a town where we really don't have public transportation, where you have to have a car, there still will be probably a car outside that won't fit in because he's going to have his boat in there. There'll probably be 2 cars outside. So we did a lot of research because I know this is a topic. What is reasonable for a garage? And it's difficult to find a lot of hard data out there. We did find that according to a 2022 census, that 20% of garages built that year were 3-bay garages. There are a lot of 4 bays, there are a lot of 2 bays. Again, the average size house is a 3-bedroom house. This is a 4-bedroom house. And it's an existing 4-bedroom house that he's building. And he could go in and say, I want to build a 6-bedroom house or an 8-bedroom house, but he's going and rebuilding what's there. So I think he's really trying to be reasonable. And a lot of care has been put into that existing footprint. Yes. He's planning on using the upstairs for storage, but he doesn't want to be limited to that. But it's not we're not proposing to go above 4 bedrooms.
Tell us about the sports car.
What's that?
Tell us about the sports car.
The sports car?
Yeah, is there a sports car involved here?
Maybe more than one?
Yes,
You could, if you'd like to address the board, please approach them. Yeah.
sorry. My name's Rich Hall. Yes, I have an unfortunate hobby, which is vintage race cars, mainly BMWs. I have a 1974 BMW that I drive on the road that's off the property, and I have a same car that is a race car that I vintage race and work on and have fun with. So that's one of my hobbies.
And hence the workshop. That's related to the automotive end of it.
I'm sorry?
The workshop that was mentioned, is that?
Oh, in the garage?
Yes, that
Yeah,
related?
in general, yes. I work on my boat, I work on my race cars. I do a little bit of work on my personal car, so that's not as much fun.
So can you tell us, I noticed the floor plan that was presented to the board in the application indicates a stairwell at the rear of the garage, which I
Sure.
presume is to access the second floor.
Correct. If you look at the design of the house, it does not have an attic, it does not have a basement. So the second floor of the garage was primarily for storage.
And that stairway location is non-negotiable, I take it? Tell us why that's so important.
Where the stairway is?
Yeah, where it's proposed to be.
Well, we need a stairway to go upstairs.
Understood.
To use the upstairs, we felt that location would impact the garage space on the first floor the least, as far as usability.
Thank you.
I think maybe where we're going with this is, can we move the stairs and make the driveway a little narrower? And make the garage a little narrower. So part of the idea, though, is to use that area under the stairs as part of the workshop. So it's getting a dual use. So he's planning on using to a certain
Part of it on
the storage and
also to have space in front of the car to have a workbench and
having the space in front of the car is very important.
be able to work on things.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, please.
So I guess one of the things that we have to, like the last hearing we had, a connector and a garage is a very reasonable use, but what's reasonable? 2, 3, 4, 6 bays? That's something that we can talk. I don't know what's been decided before. But if you're asking for a variance for 4 feet, and I see the stair, and I guess, why can't the stair be moved to a sidewall? I don't see any restrictions. And a truck is 19 feet long, a heavy-duty, full-size, with the 4 doors is typically 19 feet long. And to fit that into a 24-foot bay is fairly reasonable.
But you lose space on either end, and if you ever need to open the hood, if, say, your electronically dependent car runs out of battery and you need to get a jump start and you're parked front end, a 24-foot garage is very challenging, if not adequate. And since I wrote this, I have a personal experience with this. And I can say that as a professional, I would not recommend, I'm not an architect, I'm an engineer. I would strongly advise thinking about how long your garage is and making sure that you can walk around the perimeter of your vehicle and open up the hood enough to at least be able to charge your battery.
Well, I wish that was the case in my garage, but it's not.
It's not the case in my garage either. And that goes into what is reasonable. So I think that when a lot of these smaller garages, so my garage was designed by an architect that did a lot of work in New London and tends to be a little bit smaller. It's just things have changed. So there's a lot of cars that have gotten smaller, but a lot of vehicles that have gotten bigger. And Frank's right, a big truck is 19 feet, and that's a huge truck. That's one that you'd see in the parking lot and would be noticeably bigger than probably some of the other vehicles.
Well, no doubt if you're doing this a lot, you know the case law on use, reasonable use, what the courts have said about it. I do believe it was the Supreme Court of New Hampshire. Reasonable use is not maximum use.
No. And we actually had to talk down from, I think, even maybe a bigger garage, but it's one bay bigger than what is there now. But that was, in consideration was given to the structures as a whole. And how can we make the structure as a whole more nearly compliant while still achieving the long-term goals of what Rich and Tammy want to do on the property and live there comfortably. It's not,
Conrad, did you?
I'm just curious. The existing house was present prior to the application of these zoning laws?
no, the property. Well, the property in its existing, with the existing setbacks, the subdivision of the land itself.
Right.
But you can see that the house
But
is-
the house
is-
was built in 1958, which was 1 year prior to the original zoning, or,
So
I'm
we're
sorry, it was
applying
built in
zoning
1957.
to Existing lots and structures.
Pre-existing, non-conforming, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm also correct when I assume that the house that's sitting next door, that's 7 foot off of the property line, was also sitting there as well, right? Where I'm going is if both houses were there,
That one was built in 1960, which would have been 2 years after zoning. However, I don't know what the 1959 zoning ordinance was for them to have applied for that building permit, if they even required a building permit. So I think you can presume it's non-conforming.
but if I look at and say, what is the purpose of that zoning thing and how much crowding can you have? Then I look and say, well, what's the clearance between that house and the existing house? Okay, you're within setbacks, they're clearly existing and can't do anything about it, that we're applying them to them. But we're now looking at a garage back there that's closer than 25 feet, isn't it?
As proposed.
Diagonal, yeah, the proposed garage.
that's going to be attached to the house.
But I'm trying to figure out why I would want to have on that particular property line further encroachment, putting houses closer together.
But we're actually moving it further apart.
The garage,
But the house is closer now, so we're moving the structure further away from the property line in our proposal. But part of the footprint is not within the grandfathered area where the setback has already been encroached upon.
correct. But I'm trying to figure out why I need to have the garage that much closer to that line when that line has actually already been encroached from the other side. So if I'm looking at trying to get 40 feet, which is what normally would be between two, right?
Buildings on separate lots, yes.
Yeah. Then this would actually shorten that up, wouldn't it?
So
Which
Conrad, there's-
doesn't really go with the spirit of the ordinance, but that's another
No,
argument.
so, the house to the neighboring house, you can't do anything about the neighbor's house,
No, we
which is
can't.
6'9".
We're stuck.
But the house, which is the closest structure to the neighboring, they are within they're outside of the setback.
Correct.
It's
They're-
the garage,
they're
and the
trying to
garage is
comply.
the garage is a good distance away. I'm pretty sure that's close to 40 feet.
It's going to improve the aesthetic of the neighborhood substantially. And that would be
we're-
one desirable reason to put it closer.
So I could understand what you're saying. If
Yeah.
the garage was next to the neighbor's house, that's a conversation we should have. But the house, they're allowed to build it. The proposed house is what's closest to the neighboring house.
I know, but help me, I'm not a builder. You got the two of them tied together, and you got a two-story structure that's sitting within that setback, which the other side is already crowded, and they can't do anything about it. It got applied to them, just like this one did.
But is it
So
fair?
is this all unknown?
But is it fair to allow somebody to have their house 6 feet away, which is already in the character of the neighborhood, and then penalize them for having their house that close? Because, it's not fair, because if they're allowed to have their house 6 feet, then why can't Rich and Tammy be?
Well, unfortunately, that's not kind of how that works.
I understand.
That's why the board has to decide that. So the way I see it is you need a variance, the applicants need a variance only for this western wall of the garage. Okay, in order to show that they're entitled to that variance, they have to meet the criteria, all 5, by a preponderance of the evidence. Now, as I understand the hardship one,
Is accessibility and having adequate space to enter and exit their driveway and turn around on their property.
okay, so here's the deal. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not here to say who the deal is. We take a vote, but I just have an opinion. The way I interpret the regs and the law is for the petitioner to explain to me what are the particular physical characteristics of that lot where the garage sits that makes the application of the setback rule as proposed would deny him reasonable use of that garage. Now, everybody there, everybody in this area, there are all these, as Ann refers to them sometimes, bowling alley lots. They are what they are. They were approved at the time they were approved. They're there. You have mentioned some water issues. Every one of those lots is all subject to the same setbacks that this one is. So, in order for us to find hardship, you've got to explain to the board what is the physical characteristic of that lot, where that garage is, that makes this setback application deny them reasonable use of that property. What is
I
it? They can't move it 6 feet into the driving area where they're already driving? You
If
have to
we-
explain that to them. It's
I-
not just me. You have to convince us all by a
I see.
preponderance that a hardship exists, and this is the only relief that's possible. That's the gravamen of this, as I see it. I don't see a problem with any of the other criteria, though we haven't actually discussed them. There's no
Yes, this-
fundamental change in the use of the neighborhood. There's other substantial justice we haven't talked about, but hardship is really the gravamen of this petition.
In order to build a garage that has been designed to suit, we're looking at a garage that's a relatively average size garage. It's on the smaller side for a 3-bay garage. It's very challenging to put a 3-bay garage if we were to orient it 90 degrees and keep it detached, similar to the way that it is now. We're going to be faced with issues for ingress and egress, and we would have a substantially larger impact on the property. It also, and this gets into a reasonable use. They really want to have the garage be attached. But that's not necessarily a hardship. Well,
it can still be attached and
No, I think,
move.
Michael, do you mind, I'll try to summarize it. What I'm seeing is that They have a septic system that's in place.
Yes.
They have a well that's in place. What they've done with the house is quite an improvement. But in order to be able to pull out of that garage, I think a garage is a reasonable use. A connector, a mudroom is a reasonable use.
No one's,
But the difficulty is, Michael, that in order to be able to pull out of the garage, if you move that garage outside the setback, you would not be able to pull out without going onto the neighboring property.
Yes.
I think that's the difficulty. Peter, you have experience with this, and I agree with you. If you have a 19-foot truck, you're not left with much space to be able to turn the car. You're left with 7 feet. So there's that. Where I'm having the difficulty is, and we can talk about this more later, is reasonable use versus maximum use. Is a 3-car reasonable compared to a 2? I'm sure they can prove that. I think where I'm struggling with is the depth, 28 feet. That gives you 27 feet inside, and again, if you've got a 19-foot truck, that's a good amount of room to walk around and be able to work on a vehicle. And again, that's the size of 19 feet is huge.
Yes,
It is noticeable, yeah. So you have plenty of room behind the truck, in front of the truck. So that's where I'm having a challenge with, and I'd like to hear, because you can easily move, if you just move the stair to the side, there's your 4 feet. You're no longer within the setback.
I mean, one thing we thought about is, we talked about moving the stair. We need one bay to be that long. And we thought about that. Can we move the stair and have it as an L and decrease the encroachment?
Yeah, I look at this and say, if you move it to a side, you can make that garage as wide as you need it to be, because you're within the buildable area.
And then it starts, and Rich, you can elaborate a little more on this, but it also gets into how the garage connects to the house, and that may impact how the configuration of the house is located in relation to the setbacks.
The whole idea for attaching the garage is so you don't have to go outside and fall in the driveway in the wintertime. And also to be able to live there a good part of our life, right? So if you look at the design of the house, we've actually designed an elevator shaft in there so that we can get from floor to floor. If we need to be in a wheelchair, it can go up and down step, whatever. So attaching the garage that's kind of where it started. Also be able to put the boat in the garage. I measured, it's essentially a 20-foot boat, and you've got the tail of the trailer, adds 2, 3, 4 feet. So 28 feet would allow you to get the boat in the garage. Example, it's unfortunate, this October the boat sank. We got it out of the lake, needed to get the motor running. I didn't have anywhere to work on it. I had to work outside on the rain. It was fairly urgent. So would like to have a workspace to be able to do work, and especially in the wintertime when it's cold.
It might also be significant to note that there's one other garage on Barton's Row. Is it 1 or 2?
Storm has a garage.
Storm has a 3-bay garage.
Yeah, I'm not concerned with the connector and the garage. I think that is a very
Bay.
reasonable use. I'm a little concerned about the size. And then my next concern is if you're asking for a variance, you're asking not just for a 1-story garage, but for 2 stories. Is there a possibility you can take that 2-story out of the setback? Again, this goes back to relocating the stair. And my job is not to design your house. I'm just looking at this saying, you're asking for a variance. Is there another possibility? Could an effort be made to avoid that?
Well, I guess if
I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
I guess if we took a vote and denied it, you'd have to. But I don't know if I understand you correctly. And what are you saying? You want to take? I
It
guess.
would significantly impact the anticipated use of the property.
Right, and I asked, why does it need to be 28 feet? The response is that he has a boat that he's looking to store. I guess we can have that conversation is, again, reasonable use. Is storing a boat in your garage a reasonable use? And also remember, he could sell that property next year and you have someone else living there that doesn't have a boat.
But
Duly
storing a
noted.
boat on a lakefront property, I mean, it's all relevant.
So I have a question. I'm sorry. I wasn't following your explanation. You mentioned there would be significant impacts to the, I think you said configuration, but it sounded like something about the connector between, so what, could you elaborate on that? Because I didn't
stairs are
understand how that tracked.
Wait, the stairs are located where they are. Are they connecting to the main house, or is that just upstairs for the storage?
Just upstairs.
All right, no, I erred. It's just going upstairs in the garage.
Okay, so then your comment about significant impacts between the connection,
It's not relevant.
so then there is not a I just want to clarify.
Well-
So is there a significant impact to because I think the concept that was
Well-
floated was, can you do something with the garage to change its configuration, still keep it connected to then come into compliance with the setback? So if there isn't this connection thing, then
Well-
would you have a response to that?
I am not the building designer, but what I can say is that whenever you make a change, and this happens a lot, it's just going to be one little change. And suddenly there's a domino effect with other things that I may or may not know. Now, can you move the stairs? I mean, I think you can do anything. I mean, it depends on how much money you have, depends on what you want to do. I mean, so when you get there's a lot of different things. So what is reasonable? What is considered a reasonable, normal use of the property? I mean, you get into a lot of different things. So if we take the stairs out, we could potentially make the garage a little narrower. I had understood that we were going to have the stairs going up, and then Rich could have some area for storing his tools and stuff under the stairs and have space to work in between, so kind of being thoughtful about the workspace. So that would be impacted. Now, is it a hardship to not have your boat in a garage? It depends. It really depends on the matter at hand. And, what's applicable at 75 Barton's Row is going to be different than what's applicable at a different location in a different context. So I think context is relevant to a certain extent. What's used on the property? There's a there's a 2-bay garage on the property. There's an existing house on the property. We're combining the two, so it's going to be one structure. But we're taking the primary living space out of the setback. And I think that's a very important factor to consider. So yes, we're putting the part of the garage outside, but when you look at square footage and the distance, we're looking at everything as a whole and making it more nearly compliant. So if it's denied, then the owners can maintain a property that's even less compliant with the zoning ordinance than the proposed conditions, which isn't desirable and is unlikely to happen. We want to go back and have something that's reasonable and approvable.
Yeah, I think we were just trying to have you elucidate the hardship criteria so that the board can then have the evidence in front of it, so then the people who can vote can actually vote.
mean-
That's what we're
tried
trying
to
to help
explain.
you actually
So the
pull
hardship
that out.
is, we want to have a garage. We want to have an attached garage. The real issue with the setback, I think, is less on whether or not it's a 1, 2, or 3-bay garage than the actual depth, that 28 feet that we keep talking about. We're going to need to have space to drive in and out and turn a vehicle around too. Well, we're not going to be able to turn completely around, but we'd like to improve accessibility. We're not going to be able to literally comply with all these regulations, and I know whether or not the driveway regulations are applicable may or may not be relevant either. But still, we want to think about safety and use in the long term. So whenever I work on something, I try to think about how can we make it better? How can we make it a little bit safer? How can we improve water mitigation? the things that the civil engineers think about.
When you just said, I've been listening to what you've been saying, but you just said you wouldn't be able to turn all the way around.
Oh,
What
yeah,
do you mean?
we need to have, and I do wish I showed the turning radii better, as Adam had suggested that I show on the plan, because I think it would help in our conversation. But we have more space to be able to turn a larger vehicle around more efficiently.
Okay, like a 3-point turn
Yes.
instead of a,
Well, maybe a 4 or 5 point turn with snowbanks rather than backing up the street to the next driveway.
right, okay.
So,
Can I ask a question, Michael? What is the width of the garage door proposed?
the garage door. Let's see.
And my question is purely, I can't get my 20-foot boat in my 9-foot garage door. So it's 8.5-foot beam plus the trailer axles extend beyond the boat. So are you doing an oversized door that's going to allow you to back this in anyways? Because it looks like it's 3 separate doors.
Yeah, they look like they're 9 foot by 10 foot, but I wouldn't attest to
So
that.
9 high, 10 wide?
9 wide, 10 high.
So,
Yeah.
I think that's something to look
So-
at, personal experience, but
Julia, what you were saying is, I can understand the need for where it's located. There's a well, there's a septic system, and the ability to be able to pull out and maneuver.
Right.
Again, where I'm struggling with is,
Right,
off of
Frank.
4 feet, you've got a reasonable garage, and you're not here for a variance. Again, reasonable versus maximum use is
Exactly.
what I'm struggling with. But I can understand the being able to put your boat in there and work on it. I would want to be able to do that, but
And
It,
Constraining them from extending the garage more than 3 bays, so that when you come in there, you angle and drop your trip.
yeah, there's nothing, so I looked at this and said 2 bays versus 3 bays. It doesn't matter. If you cut off that 4 feet, you could make this 5 bays wide. The septic system is what would restrict you.
the septic system will restrict.
Right, that's the only restriction there, not the zoning.
But it's over the length of the garage away from it. Or over the width of the garage.
I think that this is, a consideration for what is considered a reasonable dimension for a garage. Is 24 feet a reasonable dimension? Now, it's a garage, but it's also going to be his workspace. So if it's 24 feet, then Rich basically loses that ability to use that area. Is that a hardship?
let's not
I'm sorry,
confuse
to go back
hardship.
to it,
We need to make sure when you say hardship to zoning board members, it means something different. It has nothing to do with the economic plight of the owner.
Nope.
It has to do with the physical characteristics of the lot that make the application of the zoning ordinance in such a manner that it denies the landowner reasonable use of the property.
So,
That's what hardship means to zoning board members.
so
Reasonable use is something else.
So 28 versus 24 feet, though, is that reasonable use? So what we're proposing, we feel, is a reasonable size garage. It's not, is it reasonable to ask for the smallest? Is it reasonable to ask for the biggest? Is it reasonable to ask for somewhere in the middle?
so the workspace, why, is there a reason why they can't take that square footage and move it, as you said, to move it to the end, to the side? There's nothing restricting you from building all the workspace you need to
Well, you're
one
going to
side.
start getting into you're going to start getting into the side grading for the septic, for the turnaround, when you start moving further up. You could probably move it a little further. I think it's accessibility, it's the use, and how he wants to work in the garage,
I think it's the drainage,
and the drainage.
the driveway will slope down to the garage, right?
Yes, and we do have some drainage coming down there that needs to go around the back of the garage and tie back in.
So this is what I have to say. I appreciate all of this discussion. We sit here as an elected board to make people understand that the town has voted in these ordinances. We have not. And they have done that because they think this is a reasonable thing to say. So we're trying to be reasonable, and I'm hearing pushback from that from you because the owner would like 28 feet. I'd love it too, but that wasn't even a reasonable request because of a setback from my building.
Oh, I'm just trying to present
So
our
I
case.
understand, but you have to understand where we sit. And because you think it's reasonable, it is not what our ordinances say is reasonable. So I just keep thinking that line of thought.
Yeah.
We have given you the option of lessening this to 24 feet, and you wouldn't even be here, is my understanding. So,
I believe that offer was also explained in the course of the meetings with the zoning administrator, and that's fine. The petitioner is free to do whatever the petitioner would like to do. And so we're happy to be here to hear this application. I don't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to ask if any other board members had any other questions of the petitioner on any particular item, because I wanted to get an opportunity for those abutters that came, if they had something to say. I want to make sure we had worked an opportunity to have them speak as well. So I don't want to cut the discussion off, so
No,
please,
I
I
guess
just
my-
want to
my-
remind you, we need to get that done.
My one last question would be, I can understand pulling a boat in, being able to work on it. Is there any reason why all 3 bays need to be as deep as the boat bay? Because I think you can get the same square footage that you need somewhere else for a shop and so on. And I understand needing to pull in a boat, but why do all 3 bays need to be that deep? That's a question.
who else had a question? Somebody else down here wanted to speak?
Okay. Thank you. Is that a sufficient answer? You said? Anyone else on the board have questions for the petitioner? Did the petitioner want to address that last question, or can I go to the gallery, and hear from the abutters?
Yeah, so, like I said, I need to think about that, see what it would look like.
I think we've given a lot of these things thought, and every zoning board is a little bit different, and I have a lot of respect for the role that you take in upholding the responsibility that the town has in the rules and regulations. And
Yeah, I just want to ask one question. So,
Get the mic. I'm sorry. It's for the recording.
yeah, so I just like to ask one question. So we talked a lot about side yards and 2 front yards and a corner lot and all that. And I just wanted to make sure I understood what we feel the situation is. Is it a corner lot? And what would be the setbacks if the board thinks it's a corner lot?
because that's going to impact our encroachment.
It would. Go ahead.
I'd like to speak to that.
Thank
And Adam can correct me when I'm wrong, but my understanding is that it is a corner lot because it has right-of-way access plus road frontage on 2 sides. And therefore, it essentially has 2 front yards. And both of those front yards have a 25-foot setback. Lakeshore is not under discussion tonight because you're nowhere near that. But you're showing a 20-foot setback, when in reality, that easterly side is a 25-foot setback. Now, this means this doesn't impact your house, I think, because it's being built within the footprint of your existing house.
Well, not totally. So we moved it to stay within that 20-foot setback, so it's rotated slightly.
Oh, okay, so
So I'm almost thinking that I think we've had a really good conversation tonight, and I really appreciate all of your feedback. And I think that we have more discussion to have. However, I think Rich and I might need to talk, but I think that we really, to have an educated conversation. We need to see how this fits with the 25-foot setback. And I think that it might be helpful for the board to see how, I think that's the first thing, because applying that setback is going to change this a lot. And we might be able to scoot it over one way or the other, but we're going to probably have some sort of encroachment. But I think that I would like the board's opinion, though. We will need to have a variance for that lower front corner, but it's so much more nearly compliant from one side to the other. I think I would just like to know if there's a concern from the board about that aspect too that we need to consider.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't give advisory opinions.
No.
Okay.
But I would like to hear from the neighbors, and it may be good for you
Yeah.
also.
If now's a
would
good
too.
time, we should hear from the abutters if they wish to address us for any reason.
Michael, just to be clear though, are you going to ask for a continuance? Is that where we're going?
I think that we need to. I think that additional information would probably be necessary to make a decision.
I think you're right. A decision that, yes, a decision. Okay, any abutters I see, or anyone that's attending this hearing wish to add comment or pose questions to the board or the petitioners? Nothing. And you're all set?
I am all set.
Thank you. Please do. Conrad.
Is it possible to have two corner lots at this particular location? Because the property sitting beside it, I would recognize as a corner lot.
Well, that's an
Which
interesting
one?
question.
Oh, I see. The property beside it has 3 sides,
Yeah.
and
So that's a corner lot.
yeah, and
Now, how
That
does-
would be
How does
considered
a
a side
housing
yard.
court look at you and go, is this a corner lot too?
Yeah.
So I think that the interpretation would then fall to Article 5, where it says on each corner lot there shall be a yard having a width of not less than 25 feet abutting each right-of-way, and the key there would be 25 feet abutting each right-of-way. So it may be corner in a different context if we think of a corner, but I've seen subdivisions before that have a loop road, and instead of having a cul-de-sac, sort of open space in the middle, that is actually a building lot, and there's a house, and the road completely circumnavigates that, and they have a front yard setback the entire perimeter of their lot. I mean, really, it's a circle. And so it's a corner lot. You never get out of the corner. But
That's not what we have here, but what we do have here, if we're taking Stephen's lead and reconsidering and rereading it and applying to the best of our ability the definition as given, we would say that the side of the garage that faces Lakeshore Drive would require a 25-foot setback because it faces, and that was considered to be a front yard. And then the easterly side of said garage where the doors are also has a 25-foot setback. Yes, that's what we came
Yes.
up with?
And
Okay.
Aaron, that's not an issue for where the garage is now. The proposed garage, that's not an issue. You're well outside of, you're outside of the 25-foot
The
setback.
25-foot setback,
'Cause
it
if
looks like it
it
spills
looks
out.
like
Purple
we are
lines.
now.
So the westerly side of the garage, the side which the diagram shows is a proposed encroachment, would have a 20-foot setback under the corner lot rule
Correct.
that we're proposing, yes? And the side, of course, facing the lake, we don't care about.
So the existing garage would be,
Sorry, Rich, can we just catch it on the recording? Can you speak through the...
excuse me. So the existing garage would be even further encroaching than what we think it is now.
The front yard, yeah.
Correct, the front yard would go to 25, yeah.
So you'd be reducing some setback.
So we would be making the garage potentially more nearly conforming in its own sense.
Whether it's more nearly may depend on.
I would want to
square
calculate the
footage.
area, but if say, for example, currently, I'm just going to throw out a number, 25 square feet is within the side yard setback in existing conditions, and in proposed, we make it 15. But it would be in 2 different areas. it still is 5 square feet less that's within the side yard setback when you look at the property as a whole.
Well, if,
But it would be on
I'm
two different
confused.
well,
side yards.
this square foot analysis and trading setbacks and violation, I mean, areas that are in violation is another matter for another day, I think.
But your chart says 153 square feet are within the proposed setback.
Yes, it's going to change because now it's 25 feet.
No, I'm talking about the back of your currently proposed garage. Your
The area
chart
Yes,
says-
I was just showing I was just
you weren't being
putting up
precise.
random numbers.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
no, I
okay.
understand
gotcha,
that.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my understanding then, that it's the petitioner's wish to continue this matter to a date certain,
Yes,
and at that time, we will bring back other proposals for us to review.
yes,
Okay, and then I guess the deal is that if we continue it to a date certain, there is no need to renotice the lengthy list of abutters. So now all we need to do is ask our scheduler when would be the next available date certain and see if that would afford you time enough to put together the presentation you wish.
So the next regularly scheduled meeting would be January 7th. We have not had the deadline for January 7th yet. However, we did receive an application for that night, so we will be here that night. So I don't think there's danger in just continuing it to then, if because of the holidays getting in the way.
If
we
that
can
gives you
reach
time
out.
enough to put together what you want to do,
But
given the
the
holidays.
point I was making, Michael, is if it doesn't make enough time, we will be here that night anyways. They can communicate that to me. You'll be here to make a motion to continue that to a date further out if it's not enough time.
So the point being that we will go ahead and set the matter down for January 7. And at that time, if you need more time, you may come and,
Assuming that you can actually be here on the 7th first, both of
or
you?
send a representative or something.
Yes.
Just for the purposes of, yeah, sorry, we're not ready, we need another 2 weeks, or whatever. But at least that'll give us a date certain and put us on the calendar.
Now, would the board like the materials in advance of that date certain? Should we,
Certainly
As
helpful,
far ahead as you can.
okay.
certainly helpful. We do
We'll
appreciate
we'll
that.
work to get it at least a week in advance, so you can have some time to review the information prior.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And we appreciate your time tonight.
Well,
Thank
sorry,
you.
we couldn't thoroughly resolve it, but I think we've had some good discussion and some good issues have been raised, and I think to continue it would be a wise decision for everyone.
I think it was a great conversation. Thank you.
Right, you're welcome. Thank you.
We do have to take a vote to continue, though. So someone needs to make a motion
Then the
to
chair would
continue
entertain a motion
to
to continue the matter to a date certain of January 7th.
7th, 6:30. Yep, got it.
Do I have a motion? My motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second from Heidi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, the ayes have it. This matter is continued to January 7th, 6:30 at Whipple. Now, what else is on the agenda? I see review of minutes.
None to review tonight. We do have a new minute taker, so welcome to Kelsey Clark.
Thank you.
Under other business, I know everyone probably is eager to get home, but if I can have 2 minutes just to update you on the ordinance work that the planning board is doing, I think it would be of interest. The planning board was approached by the college to consider allowing lights on the fields, the turf field at Kelsey Field.
This is not new.
It
There has been
is-
some discussion in the past. Good night.
Thank you,
folks.
guys.
Thank you.
It's new again.
Exactly.
So there was not the allowance in the institutional recreational zone to erect either access road or parking lot lights or field lighting. The college has a donor that has stepped up to donate lights on the field that are designed to dark sky standard, which the International Dark Sky Association is a fairly well-known lighting nonprofit, that the lighting technology has come very far. So the college started early in the fall by meeting with abutters, and they were obviously the concerned party, at different times when this has come out throughout the years. And the abutters who had I would say a fairly warm reception. Obviously, they're concerned about what the impacts are, but they were supportive and they understand the needs of the college to recruit and retain students. And so they supported the work with the planning board through the work sessions on amending that. And the abutters have been very active in helping draft the language so that they are, really feel taken care of and protected, I think. And so they've been working through that. The videos are all posted online. I think that's probably helpful. We can get you a draft too next Tuesday. I've got some changes to make from the one last Friday, but it should be posted later this week. And then next Tuesday, the planning board at their regularly scheduled meeting will sort of have their last time to work on it and decide to move it forward to town meeting. Fairly restrictive in that it's lights on just the field. Also, obviously, the parking lot and the access road. If you're going to allow people to be down there after dark, you need safe passage. But the timing in which they have to be shut off, the time that can elapse between the field lights being shut off and the road lights needing to be shut off, the days per week that they can be used. There's a lot of standard within there. But just so you're aware that this has been a cooperative effort.
So is this proposed regulation of field lighting applicable only in the institutional zone, or would it be is it intended to be applied to any athletic field lighting within the town of New London?
Nope, only in the institutional recreational zone. So even parsed down from the institutional college zone, Kelsey Field has already always been its own institutional recreational zone, and this is an amendment to that section of the ordinance.
Right. So where's
What's
Woodard
that, Steve?
Park?
I'm sorry. No.
Pardon? Understood, but what zone is that in? It's not in a recreational zone, it's not in an institutional zone.
No.
So, right, so my point is, wouldn't it be nice if we had this lighting regulation in effect that applied to that kind of lighting no matter where you put it? I mean, the whole point is to make sure the light goes down, it doesn't reflect.
Well, we have
minimum impact on all the neighbors. I can't see why that wouldn't be important, no matter where you decided to put such lighting.
those standards exist in our site plan review regulations as it is. This is specific to athletic field lighting, which is obviously a different beast when the pylon is substantially higher. As far as instituting dark sky compliance townwide, I think that's fairly progressive, or that would be a fairly progressive approach. I don't think it's out of the question of a place that we may get in the next 10 years, but it's definitely, I would say, a little bit more cutting edge at this point. So,
I think it's great. I just was thinking it would be nice if we could have it
but this is
apply.
specific to the rest of those lighting regs are outside of the zoning ordinance. Those are in the site plan review regs. So, anyways, that's the update. Oops.
I have one request for the zoning changes. Our zoning specifically refers to Colby Sawyer. Can we strike that name out of there and keep it as institutional?
Agreed.
Yeah, that's really
That
bad. It would be
conversation
like-
has happened, and I think that there's fear in doing so.
Yeah, no, that's like,
So I would invite you to,
not just spot zoning, I mean, it's specific to a certain a resident. It would be like creating a speed limit for one person.
I agree with you, Frank, and even in this, what is being proposed, the issue of wrestling with how do you constrain the athletic lighting to a single field and not making it zone-wide without naming that field, because that's how, right, the one set of lights is the mutually agreed upon
That is
comfort level,
that
which
is-
is important, and
It's a challenge.
it's always going to be a challenge. I mean,
What was the term
it's a
used?
negotiation.
Spot zoning?
Well, they should say then, currently occupied or owned by Colby Sawyer or
Again, we should
utilized
not
by
be-
Colby Sawyer College.
yeah,
You
we
know what I
should
mean? They
not
have
be
to-
using
they gotta- Yeah.
I mean, truthfully,
It'd be like
naming,
Michael's house.
naming the International Dark Sky Association is something that, is obviously a little bit troubling to me. However, it's an institution that's been in place for 40 years. It's a national standard for lighting. These lights have a 30-year warranty when they are installed, and then a useful life past that warranty. So the conversation has gone that, okay, if the International Dark Sky association goes out of business and there's a different standard, we will not be in a situation where within 1 year we have a new site plan that we don't have the ability to address that, presumably.
Aren't there 3 playing fields down there?
There are.
There are.
And all 3 can get lighted, or?
Not in the current iteration of the proposal. I forget the name of the middle field. It's Sally Keach or Sally Veach.
Not only,
It specifically names the Sally Veach field so that all 3 fields do not end up with independent lighting systems.
so not only is it spot zoning, but it's specific to a certain area of that.
Right. I mean, we got into the point of, do we write setbacks so constraining that it literally creates a box around the Sally Veach field, and then that gets to, just say you can have that field, and so we have it Sally Veach or however it was written,
So does this-
subsequently known.
Does town council review this?
Not yet. They review it
will?
after, right. Right. So once the proposals are made, they review them all before it goes to public hearing.
I don't. I understand.
So that's actually, I'll find the date for you guys because I think you would find it interesting watching the video with they actually had the consultant from International Dark Sky. At the last minute, unfortunately, he couldn't be here in person, so it was rigged remotely through my laptop via Zoom here, which was a little challenging, but the presentation can be watched. And it's really interesting to hear their presentation on how their lighting systems have cut down glare, which is great for the neighbors, but also for the athletes and the fans because it completely cuts off that glare and has a clean cut. And so you can see they compare the different fields, and they have some examples in Manchester, Plymouth, State, where their systems have been installed. Unfortunately, lighting technology is changing so quick that even those 2 installed within the last 5 years are not the standard that would be installed here. So even if the way it's written, it's the latest standard. So if they don't make it to site plan review for 2 years, and there's a different standard by International Dark Sky that's been developed between now and then, they would be held to the then, not what is on the books today, which presumably gets better and better with each iteration.
Yeah, personally, I don't have an issue with the lights whatsoever. Every high school in the state has lights. I think the college should be allowed to.
The presentation is really cool. I'll send you guys the link.
My issue is that it's Colby Sawyer.
Get,
So if we deny anything, Colby Sawyer can easily come along and say, well, they're singling us out.
understood. I believe we're still on the record, and that's fine. The record won't matter, won't object to what I have to say, and what I have to say is that I'm very proud to sit as chair of this board because I think each and every one of you brings something to the table, and it's a pleasure to get in here and kick this around. I think we're very thorough. I think we hit all the issues. And I'm just so pleased to have you guys on board. I think it's great. So nobody quit right away.
And I took your next meeting off your calendar because you guys have had to meet a lot recently comparative to your track record. And given that it was the week before the holidays, I thought you could use maybe a little period. So your next regular.
We're taking it off for Adam also.
Great. So
I just had another meeting get scheduled that night, so one or the other. But so our next regularly scheduled is January 7th.
all right. So please keep up the good work, everybody. And we'll see you all on January 7th. I hope everyone has a pleasant holidays, plural.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn? I do. Seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.